Damn, son, where'd you find this?
People don't be offended by the truth. They be offended because you called out the truth. Simple as that. They don't want to hear any other narrative that makes them look bad.
And one thing I can't stand at this big grown age is somebody who act like cause and effect does not exist. Like, yes, your actions caused this outcome. Yes, what you did lit the match. Like, why are you surprised and playing victim?
Guys, Chico, they never lied.
That's how you know somebody doesn't respect you. They listen to reply, not to be understood. They cut you off. They minimize what actually matters to you. They laugh at your boundaries, and then they call you sensitive when you try to hold the line. They show up late, they cancel last minute, forget the things you've told them, because in their world, your time, your energy, even your voice aren't a priority. They're just an option. You see, there are two kinds of people. Those who adjust when they realize they've actually hurt you, and those who expect you to adjust so they don't have to change. You don't need to be disrespected loudly to be disrespected deeply. Sometimes you'll see it. It's just in their tone, in their patterns, in the silence after you're known. Respect isn't what they say when they're watching. It's how they act when they think you'll tolerate it.
By examining his own attitude towards the possibilities of peace, towards the Soviet Union, towards the course of the Cold War.
Art muscle. It was a way of making me feel that they were a part of me.
You see it on the bridge. Wait, how they get it? If the government had to change the screw in the bridge, they had to shut it down. They got state troopers out there. They got lanes closed. They got their strange machines. How did they get up there?
Yo. What's good? How's everybody doing this evening? Peace, praise, glory, and honor to the Most High. Welcome to Chaos Theory. The first one officially back live this year. I hope all is well. Shout outs to the poets, to the creators, all of y'all out there. I thank y'all for being here with us this evening. This is one of my favorite portions of the week, always, because it's diverse and it takes you out of the drama and the gossipy stuff. You know, proud and honored to have this segment here. Proud and honored to have Sydney take the lead on this one. I'm going to bring her up and do me a solid. Welcome her with open arms. She is the mastermind behind this. Let's go ahead and get this show started. Yo.
Hello. How are you?
I am simpatico.
That's good. I'm excited for this one. As you know, these are my favorite types of topics.
Right on.
Also, I thought it'd be kind of fun to show people if anyone's watching. But there's the little guy or girl, whatever it is.
That's what's up.
So come July, I'll have another screaming Mimi around the house.
Hey man, congratulations again.
Thank you.
Y'all excited? How is everybody reacting to the news?
We're excited. My mom was like, I knew it because I had a dream. I was like, okay. My husband's nervous because he really wants a boy. So he'll definitely come around if it is a girl, because he absolutely loves our daughter. But he really wants a boy, so our son can have a playmate. Even though him and our daughter are definitely playmates right now. I also would prefer a boy, just because I don't know if I want to handle two angsty teenage girls when I'm older, but we'll see what happens. So yeah, it'll be exciting, and just in general, it's always a blessing to have a child and watch them grow and become people, individuals. So it's pretty cool. And definitely, now that I have a puppy and a child, it's not the same thing. All those people that are like, a dog is basically a child. No, it's not. It's not. The dog is not going to grow up and be able to laugh with you about all the stuff that it does. A child, you'll be able to be like, you did all these things. We can laugh about it. But that dog, he's going to be eating off the floor until he's 18. So, much as I love him. But yes, definitely. I did not have a puppy at older ages. We had one when I was like 5, but I don't really remember much of that. So it's definitely an experience having one as an adult and having to manage that. And honestly, it makes my children feel easier than the dog, just because I don't have to worry about my kids just eating random stuff off the floor, peeing on the floor, getting into stuff, chewing things they're not supposed to. Like, he chewed the wall and he like pees on the rug, and I'm like, oh my god. I definitely thought that the dog would be easier than the kids, but it's not the case. As much as I love him, he's an adorable puppy, but yeah, he's something else.
Well, look, everything is in God's hands, so whatever He has for you, it's going to be all right either way.
Yeah,
for sure. Well, look, I'm gonna turn it over to you. I'm gonna let you do your thing. You know where I'll be at, and enjoy the show, folks.
Awesome. Yeah, so as you know, or if you watched this before, I love myself some natural disasters. So I was very excited to be able to do this particular episode. I chose this episode for today because it pseudo falls on the anniversary of this particular event that we'll be talking about. And it also it coincides with what's going on right now in California already, as well as Washington. I'll kind of talk about both of them first, and then I'll get into the historical event. But yeah, I was very inspired to talk about this because of the stuff that's going on right now in our state. We have been having this will be an important term that I'll be referring to a lot in the episode. I've probably mentioned these before, but arc storms are what caused the flood of 1862, as well as the floods that we're seeing this year and last year a little bit, towards the, like December. Arc storms are short for atmospheric rivers, not named after the Noah's Ark, even though it works out that way. Or I think actually they did add the K in there just so it matched the Noah's Ark theme. But basically what atmospheric rivers are is a long train of storms that come in back to back to back that typically carry an exceptional amount of rain. And just like hurricanes, atmospheric rivers are rated by how severe they're going to be. Typically, their strength is based on, I believe, the amount of rain. Let me see. Yeah, 3-hour average of integrated water vapor. So however much rain is available within the clouds, that's how they categorize the atmospheric rivers, which is different from hurricanes, because hurricanes and tornadoes are given their ratings by the wind. So it is slightly different categorization, but they do still have 5 categories. Hurricanes category 5, category 1 through 5. Tornadoes are Fujita, the enhanced Fujita, so it would be EF 1 through 5, and the atmospheric rivers are category 1 through 5. Category 1 is a weak storm, primarily beneficial, which means most of the rain that you're going to get is just going to saturate the soil, give it to plants, refill reservoirs, basically replenish the water systems in those areas. Moderate would be mostly beneficial, but also hazardous. So so you're going to be getting that replenishment of rivers, systems, and the soil. But you could also get some flooding if you're along like river systems, streams, low-lying areas. A strong AR arc storm would be both beneficial and hazardous almost equivalently. And that would be, you're going to get a lot of, like, you're going to refill those reservoirs, you're going to refill those rivers, but people are also going to be put at risk by this storm. Extreme is mostly hazardous, also beneficial. Of course, rain is always going to be beneficial to the most degree. But in extreme storms, they're going to be mostly hazardous. So especially if you're in low-lying areas, they could cause significant flooding. They can cause landslides. They can cause land subsidence, where the ground like literally falls out underneath. And then I hear her. And then exceptional atmospheric rivers would be considered primarily hazardous. So you're getting so much rain that it's not going to do much good. It can even wash away the topsoil. It's going to destroy anything in its path. So exceptional atmospheric rivers are quite dangerous. And I believe, if I remember correctly, flooding is up there with the most dangerous natural disasters. I saw this chart the other day. Let me double check for you. Let's see. The most dangerous natural disasters tend to be floods, extreme heat, hurricanes, cyclones, and earthquakes at high magnitude. There are a couple ongoing flood events right now. The more major one, I would say, is going on in Washington. Haven't seen too many updates lately, just on the inundation that they've been experiencing. I've been seeing more so like the flood recovery stuff, but I know they have been continuing to get hit with rain over the past couple weeks, even though the flooding had started in December. And that was more, that's taking place in northern Washington towards Seattle, up basically along the, which river is it? I think it's the Snohomish and the Skagit River. I'm going to butcher the sound of that. But they've been really affecting the river systems that are going east across the state. And a lot of homes have been literally washed away. Like, this flooding is severe enough that you'll see houses just like floating down the river, completely wiped out. And a lot of people, I think at one point, over 1 million people were under evacuation warnings. So it was pretty severe, and they categorized it, I believe, as a 1 in 1,000 year storm. It was either 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 100, but both of them are very significant. When they categorize these storms as like once in a century, or like one in 500 year storm, 1 in 1,000. It's technically not saying like every 1,000 years you're going to get these storms. What they are saying is statistically, it's something that would only happen every 1,000 years or so. So it's more so like the percentage chance of it happening. And so when they say that it's like a 1 in 1,000 year storm, they're saying like it's an extremely unlikely, unheard of event. They're not saying like, oh, 1,000 years ago we had the same storm. It's just telling you the likelihood of something happening. I don't know if I explained that the best, but you can definitely find more about how they do that math online. I'm just not very much a mathematician, so I'm not as great as at explaining their like how they define the 1 in 1,000, 1 in 500. But it's a little bit different than what you'd think. It's more percentage likelihood than like actual interval science. The other flooding events right now is going on in California. We have had very consistent rain since I think it started just before Christmas. And the whole state basically has been getting storm after storm after storm. A lot of it has been centralized in the north part of California towards like Mendocino County area, Eureka County, as well as LA. LA has gotten a lot of the severe rain as well. It's kind of interesting. I was looking at this the other day. The ground can only hold so much water. When, as I said, with the ratings, some amount is beneficial when you've been going through a drought. Atmospheric rivers are very beneficial because there's underground aquifers, like there's lakes on top of the surface of the earth, but underneath there's also aquifers that often people rely on for drinking water. These storms will recharge aquifers, which get depleted during long-term droughts. And we've been going through a very long-term drought in California, at least 5 years, I believe. I think 2017 was the last time we were not in a drought state. But it has reversed the drought basically in its entirety. This is a updated image for the drought monitor. Yellow is basically the darker the orange, it's minor, mild, moderate. Dark orange is moderate. Light is minor. But we're basically like, I don't know if you can see that very well. Let me lower my brightness maybe. Oh, that's too dark. That's better. Yeah, you can see basically California only towards the bottom. Do we really have any moderate drought? There's a tiny bit up in the north, but pretty much the entire state of California is drought free. The other cool part I found really interesting, the dark blue is 100% soil moisture, which means the earth, the ground, the soil is completely saturated with water, which is very problematic during floods because that means the ground can no longer take up any more water. And so when there's rain, it just sits on top of the land, or if it's at an incline, it'll just run off. But that's currently where we're at right now. So besides the desert region of California, there is basically full saturation of the soil in California. Just to kind of give you an idea of what it could look like, that is the Midwest right now, or kind of Midwest, Colorado, even out to like Florida is going through a drought right now, which is interesting. You wouldn't think that Florida would have a drought, but they're having their own version of a drought. But yeah, California right now is completely saturated with water. This is both a good thing, but also not a good thing, because it's a good thing, obviously, because we have resolved the drought. We've been replenishing our snowpack. We've been replenishing our aquifers. Our dams are dammed areas are full. The rivers are more full, and the forests are perking up a bit. When you go through droughts, a lot of the trees will start to dry out, which increases your likelihood of severe severe what do you call it? I'm totally blanking. What was I saying? Of severe wildfires. So yeah, we have basically brought us out of this super dry period, but it means now that we've had all of this rain, when it does rain, it's going to flood, especially if you're in low-lying areas, if you're along riverbanks, people who are in wetland areas. And another problem that has been cropping up lately is king tides, the coincidence of these flooding rains with a king tide. For those of you that don't know what a king tide is, it's when the moon and the sun and the earth are basically perfectly aligned. And because of that, there's a massively increased pull on the tides. And so it basically pulls the water into the land. And so places like Marin County, up north, Santa Cruz towards, I think even San Diego was having issues with this. You're having excess rain output and higher tides. And so people are having flooding that they've never seen before. In Marin County, they had, I think, like 3 feet of flooding or something like that. It was a couple feet. And a lot of the neighbors were saying, like, we've had king tides, but we've never seen anything like this before. And it's this one, the king tides aren't permanent. I mean, those aren't as regular because it takes very specific conditions. And also the likelihood of it coinciding with extreme rainfall is more unlikely. So this isn't going to be a regular occurrence, but it is still something that was pretty interesting that was happening. Just to kind of give you an idea of, I think this is Marin County. So that's a road that runs along the beach area. Normally the coast is like out this way, but you can see that the ocean has come up over that road. Here's another one. Let's see, there's an interesting one. So this is a roadway. You can see how it's come up onto the road and people are literally driving through water. So yeah, pretty interesting. This is in Corte Madera. As you can tell, all of that brown is water. There's homes in there. One of the things that sucks about flooding is if you have floodwaters enter your home, even if it doesn't touch the stuff, if it's in the air that the water is touching, basically, you have to throw it away because the mold contamination and the potential sewage contamination is incredibly risky. So most objects, that especially soft objects, paper, stuff like that, have to be thrown away. So even if floodwaters don't actually touch your stuff, just being in the house is often enough for you to actually have to throw everything away. Oftentimes, floods within homes do enough damage just from soaking in it that sometimes you just have to tear down the whole house and start over, or at least like rip out those sections of walls. A lot of people that have flooding on a regular or have had issues with flooding in the past, they'll get mold in their walls, and black mold is particularly dangerous for people. So it can cause really hazardous conditions in your home. So it does suck if you are exposed to flooding, because it may not seem as destructive as like your stuff is literally blown away by the wind, but it can still cause you to lose everything that you have. So it's very important, if you live in areas where there's flooding, to not ignore those warnings, especially because when they give you warnings, especially with flooding, it's an estimate, and sometimes those estimates can be wrong. The amount of flooding they expect can sometimes be higher than what can be underestimated compared to what actually hits. And it only takes 6 inches of water to float a car. Most types of cars, like if you have a off-roading truck type, you might be a little bit more lucky, but most like Subarus and your average like commuter cars, it only really takes 6 inches of water to like push your car off the road to lose traction. And I think it's about 6 inches as well. Let's see how much. And yeah, about 6 inches is enough to knock an adult off their feet as well. Oh, a foot sweeps away cars. So 6 inches for a person, a foot for a car. But I highly suggest, if you see washed out roads, don't drive through the floodwaters. Do not try and like save your car, because people are swept away trying to save their cars. This happened in Spain in 2021 or 3, I forgot which year. There was extremely severe flooding in Spain. They got 10 to 30 feet in some areas, depending on where you lived. And a lot of people died because they drowned in their cars trying to move their cars out of the way of the floodwaters. So your life is worth more than your car, I promise. Insurance companies, usually if you have good insurance, they'll cover like at least the damages or replacing the car. But I promise it is not worth your life to save your car. And again, do not try and drive through floodwaters, even if it looks shallow. You don't know. You can still lose traction and float your car. And then also there could be debris in the road that you run over, nails, wood, whatever. So yeah, don't risk your car. Don't risk your life for your car. And don't try and drive through it thinking that you can. Water moving at 7 miles an hour has the same force as an EF5 tornado. EF5 tornadoes are up to like 250 miles an hour. So it says at 25 miles an hour, which is about the driving speed of just a normal street, is like being hit by winds over 700 miles an hour. So don't try to test water. Water is very, very dangerous. And the fact is too, water is carrying all sorts of stuff. You could be hit by pieces of metal, by pieces of trees, by all sorts of stuff. And then also it carries so much bacteria, because when there's flooding, it's going to pick up sewage. It's going to pick up chemicals from like factories, and who knows, like it's going to have whatever the water touches, whatever it knocks down, gasoline, oil, you know, we all can think of endless amounts of things that could be washed away into the water, and all of that is going to be in the water. So don't test a flood. They're extremely dangerous. So the ones in California weren't as severe as 1862. They were pretty bad, but 1862 was a doozy. I still marvel over how crazy this flood was. It happened between January and February of, as I said, 1862, and they basically got 40 days of rain in a row, and it ended up totaling to I'll send you the, you can put this up. Some areas it was 10 feet of flooding, but some areas reached actually up to 30 feet of flooding. For those of you who are familiar with California, or maybe for those of you that aren't, California has the Central Valley, where we have mountains running along one edge of California, and then we have mountains running along the ocean edge of California. And in the middle, it's like a huge bowl. These are places like Fresno, Bakersfield, San Bernardino. All of these are in that bowl kind of section. And that bowl area became an inland sea, essentially. And this is not unheard of in California's history, not our history, but I think, I want to say it was hundreds of thousands of years ago. 80 million years ago. It was a Great Valley Sea. So that's why you can actually find like marine fossils in those areas, because it used to be completely underwater. It was called Lake Corcoran. Very interesting to look into if you're interested in that kind of stuff. It's also why it's such a fertile valley. There's a lot of agriculture that happens in the Central Valley. It's why we also have a lot of aquifers in those areas, because it's seeped in from the ocean. But basically, it was this massive freshwater lake. And during the flood of 1862, it returned to that state for a short amount of time, short relative to the existence of California. It started in January. And one of the interesting aspects of this flood is it supposedly started by a person. California, before this, had been going through a drought, and the the government requested, there's this man named, I think, what's his name, Paul? No. Mr. Hatfield. There's Charles Hatfield. He was known as the Rainmaker, because he would use a concoction of different chemicals, which to this day they actually still don't know what he was doing. But he had some secret formula that used some of the stuff they know, like there was zinc dissolved in sulfuric acid, as well as some other add-ins. But he basically would go around the country and release these fumes, and it would trigger rain. He had done this in Texas. He had done this in other areas of the country. And so he was pretty notable for this job. And so they asked him to come and create rain for, I think it was in San Diego. It was either San Diego or Los Angeles that they asked him to create rain for them. And a month later, we got hit by 40 straight days of rain. So maybe it was a coincidence, or maybe he actually did do something. But yeah, he ended up doing what they asked him to. And ironically, they sued him. They tried to sue him for all of the damages that this flood ended up causing. But they ended up not being able to actually sue him, even though it bankrupted him going through that whole process. They weren't actually able to sue him because the court decided that it was a act of God, and so they couldn't actually attribute him specifically to that rain event. But he did have some pretty crazy timing. It makes me wonder if he actually did create that rain, or if at least maybe it just contributed to an existing pattern. Because typically after droughts, you do have a crazy amount of rain, because there's a lot that has been accumulating in the atmosphere that has not been able to be released. It does depend. There's a lot of things that contribute to weather and precipitation, but I do find the coincidence quite compelling. He did give them way more than they asked for. They had, let's see, they had in 5 days in part of San Diego, they had 17 inches of rain in 5 days, which is crazy. In San Diego, the average for rainfall is 1 inch a year. So they basically got 17 years of rain in a matter of 5 days. But yeah, these floods were incredibly intense. Let me find. It didn't just hit California. It did also affect Oregon and Idaho. But California was the most famous because it affected so much of California. In San Francisco, there was 35 inches of precipitation between December and January. There was in the Central Valley, this is where it had the most significant deep flooding, where they had 30 feet of flooding, completely submerging telephone poles that had just been put in. It basically like disrupted communications across the entire state for over a month. It took until the summer for most of this water to dissipate. So a good 6 months to drain essentially California of all of this rain that they got. My favorite story is Sacramento was a floodplain, which means it's a flat area alongside the river where water overflows when they get too much rain. And of course, when you build your cities on floodplains, when you have floods, you're going to get flooding. And the Sacramento River ended up reaching a flood level of 22 feet above the low water mark, rising 10 feet in a day, which is similar to the amount of rain that Washington is getting or had gotten at the end of last year. Also, keep in mind that water is going to be falling in one place, but water is also going to be falling onto the mountains and coming into the rivers. So that's exactly what's happening in Washington as well. But that's what contributes to severe flooding in low-lying areas, because it's not just coming from the sky, but it's also coming in from the rivers as well. So you're getting a lot of rain from a lot of places. The flooding covered an area of about 250 to 300 miles, as well as 20 miles wide, which was roughly 6,000 square miles. A lot of cattle drowned in those regions. A lot of the crops were destroyed. And again, this is my favorite story. They actually had to move our government, what do you call it? The state capital. The state capital was located in San Diego or Sacramento, and they had to evacuate him by rowboat from the second story of his building. And they ended up moving the capital temporarily to San Jose, which is near, it's a little bit south of San Francisco, about an hour and a half. Most of Sacramento was underwater for about 3 months. So yeah, I guess they moved it to San Francisco. I thought it was San Jose. But yeah, they moved the capital temporarily because of this. But I find that so funny how it was on his inauguration day too, how they had to take him out of his building via rowboat to get him out. Thankfully, because these areas were not as highly populated as they are today, there wasn't actually a huge loss of life, but it did cause significant damage to crop culture and a lot of the agriculture that existed in those areas. So it, and as I said, it covered the entire area of California. Los Angeles County was also affected by this flooding. There was an inland sea along the Santa Ana River that was about 4 feet deep, up to 4 miles away from the river. They also had flooding in San Diego, and I think to this day it's one of the most severe floods they've ever had in San Diego. And this storm itself also affected how the cities were built in the future. In Sacramento specifically, they actually raised the land I think 10 feet to avoid future flood damage like that. Let's see, economic impact. A quarter of California's estimated 800,000 cattle were killed by the flood. Estimated 500,000 lambs were killed by the floods. Oyster beds were dying from the immense amount of fresh water entering the bay. The 1/3 of the state's property was destroyed. 1 home in 8 were carried away or ruined by floodwater. Mining equipment was completely destroyed. An estimate for the property damage was about 10 million, which is today would be $390 million, but it would probably be significantly more given the much, much larger population that exists. As I said, it also affected other states. It also affected out to the desert. Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and then, as I said, Oregon and Idaho were also affected. But California arguably was the most significantly affected, given the massive extent of this flooding. So it was... No! You take that from her. Yeah. Sorry. I have a conch shell and my daughter just threw it down the stairs. Gotta love toddlers. Oh, there it is. Old Town Sacramento was raised 15 feet above flood level. The old city still remains underneath the streets. You can actually take a tour of these old tunnels, basically. Now that's what they are. Of the buildings that are there. It's pretty cool. But yeah, they basically were like, oh, not again. So they raised up the entire city by 15 feet. But yeah, this was a very significant flood. We have not seen anything close to this. I mean, we've gotten close in some pockets of California, but I don't think we've ever seen anything this widespread until honestly this year. This year seemed pretty bad. Definitely, again, not as severe as this. We did not have 30 feet of flooding in the Central Valley. We didn't have 10 feet of flooding everywhere else. But it did have a very widespread impact I've been hearing about this from Northern California all the way down to San Diego. San Diego, we had flooding in what's called Mission Valley. Our mall parking lot is very prone to flooding because it's underground, basically. And so there was flooding there. But yeah, definitely not as bad as this one. So the last one I wanted to talk about, which I find very interesting and will never happen again in all likelihood. There was in 1919 a flood in Boston called the Boston Molasses Disaster. And it occurred because a large storage tank that was filled with 2.3 million gallons of molasses, which is basically thicker versions of syrup, broke. And basically 13,000 tons burst out, and a wave of molasses just went through the streets. Went about 35 miles an hour. So very, most people would not be able to outrun that. 21 people died and 150 people were injured. But it I find that so crazy that you'd like imagine dying in that manner. Like you get to heaven, you're like, wait, did I just die by molasses? That's crazy. But this event ended up leaving the area smelling of molasses. So on hot summer days, you get that scent coming up from the ground for decades. But yeah, this was definitely a rare event. This is not something that would happen again. This is not something anybody really has to worry about because we do not transfer stuff like that in that manner anymore. But they basically believe that the event happened because it was warm outside. Or it was warming up outside. It was originally freezing. But the molasses was like colder, and so the thermal expansion made it like burst open. It was so big of a explosion that you could actually feel the ground shake, and they heard a roar as it collapsed that witnesses say was very similar to a train. And the density of molasses, so I already said 6 inches of water is enough to knock down a person. The molasses is 40% more dense than water. So it would not take that much to knock you over. And again, it was going 35 miles an hour. So that is going to whip you. The wave started off at 25 feet high. So I can't even imagine experiencing that. Just seeing like, what is that? What? Oh my God. So it was enough to knock streetcars off their tracks. A lot of buildings were crushed in the weight of that molasses. There were people that were like stuck in it. They're saying that horses died in the same way that like flies on flypaper would die, where they like got stuck and couldn't get up. So yeah, very unusual event. Definitely not the same as flooding events. And not as I said, not something that would really happen to any of us in our lifetime, or ever again. Like this is once in ever. But it was still notable enough for me to want to talk about, because I think it's not many people know about this. It's definitely not something like we hear about Hurricane Katrina, 1906 disaster in San Francisco. We all know about the like the earthquake in Japan and stuff like that, but I doubt anybody really knows about the molasses disaster of 1919. So I thought that would be kind of fun to throw in when I was talking about flooding. But before I end this, I do want to talk a little bit about close my door. I do want to talk a little bit about flooding safety. I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but just to kind of reiterate some of the points that I made, since flooding can happen anywhere, no matter where you live on Earth, even if you're not by a river, flooding is still possible. And as I said, it is highly dangerous, so it's really important to know tips and understand the true danger of what you should be doing, because really knowledge is one of the most key components in saving your life when you're experiencing any disaster. And flooding can come with a lot of other types of disasters. You can have flooding during tornadoes, you can have flooding during hurricanes, you can have flooding as a result of earthquakes, you can have flooding obviously with tsunamis. So it's a multifaceted event, but it's still something that you should really pay attention to. If it's related to storms, obviously you'll get a little bit more warning, especially if you have alerts set up on your phone. And even if you don't, sometimes the government will just send them out to anybody within the vicinity. But heed those warnings. If you're under a flood watch, get prepared, pack some clothes, pack some food, medical supplies, possibly put things up high if you know you're in a high risk area, that are like put your valuables up high, paperwork that you might need. If you have a second story or more, put it up on those higher floors. And also be wary if you are in areas that are low lying or like dry riverbeds, because flash floods can happen really fast. Flash floods are different than regular floods because they can occur without rain nearby. As I said, sometimes the rain is on the mountains and then the mountain rain flows down through the river systems. And so you can literally have just like a tidal wave of water coming up through a river. So if you live in low-lying areas next to mountains and by a river, especially one that's dry, pay attention to those too. Even if they're not close to you, they still can affect you. And then, as I said, don't walk, swim, drive. Don't go through floodwaters. Don't test them. You don't know what's in that water. It can make you sick. It can cause bodily damage if you get hit by things. It can sweep your car away. It can sweep you away. Don't try and test floodwaters. You will not win in comparison to water. And if you see fast-moving water, don't go over bridges either. Even if you think that it's not that close to you, you still don't want to tempt it because water can rise very, very quickly. In Texas, when they had the floods last year, I think water rose 36 feet in less than 4 hours or something like that. So it can happen very quickly. If you get a warning telling you to evacuate, do that. Don't worry about your stuff. Bring what you need, important documents, change of clothes, your pets, your children. Get to higher ground. Get to a higher floor. If you have to, go to your neighbors. If you have to, go to a hill. Find somewhere to go that is high. And then if you are already in flooding, like your bottom floor is already like flooded, don't try and get out. Stay where you are, and if possible, like move up to the higher floors or even to the roof. A lot of people that survived Hurricane Katrina had to do that. They had to go to the roofs and it makes it easier for you to be rescued as well if you have to be helicoptered out. And just in general, know your area, know where the mountains are, know where the rivers are. For example, when we first moved in here, I was checking like what our elevation is. We're very, very lucky where we're kind of on a plateau, so we aren't really at risk of any flooding from rivers. We could potentially have issues with landslides, but luckily we have a lot of vegetation on our hillsides around our house, so we don't really have to worry about that as much because the roots will hold the dirt together. But if you live on like rocky hillsides, you have rocky cliffs around you, sand type material, sandstone, be very, very wary of rain when it comes, because not only can flooding occur, but the water saturating into the ground can cause, as I said earlier, land subsidence. It can cause landslides, mudslides. Landslides are different than mudslides, where landslides is where the land actually collapses, where mudslides are when water mixed with dirt comes streaming down the mountain. So it's like a river of mud coming down the mountain and wiping you out. That was a huge issue that people experienced in North Carolina when Hurricane Helene came through and caused that flooding. So you want to be aware of the different types of risks that can exist where you live. If you're on steeper slopes, landslides, mudslides, that type of flooding or that type of risk is going to be more significant for you. Whereas if you live in a flat area with like low-lying areas, riverbeds, floodplains, wetlands, if you're close to water at all, even if it's a lake, be very cautious about rising floods, because you're more likely to see increasing water coming up from the ground itself. So yeah, it's really important to be aware of your surroundings, to be aware of what's going on when you have this type of weather. Make sure you know where to go. Make sure you know which like locations are safe. If you have to evacuate ahead of the storm before the rains start, there are often like shelters that are located in safe locations that you can go to that can help you escape and have resources and stuff if your house is going to be affected. So know those locations as well. Also, have important documents in waterproof containers. That way, if there is the disaster and you don't have time to get out, you don't have time to get your stuff, you still at least have like your birth certificate, the deed to your house, the insurance information, all of the stuff that you would need, your marriage certificate, stuff like that, to have on hand, and they aren't just destroyed, because that's extra cost if you have to get new ones. So yeah, and then also have an emergency kit. This is across the board for any disasters, whether it's earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes. Have non-perishable foods such as crackers, canned soups, canned food, like canned beans and fruit, canned fruits. Have water enough for several days. The rule of thumb is 3 gallons per person per day. If you have pets, don't forget to factor that in. Have food for them, have water for them, and have carriers available for your pets. If they're smaller pets, you can obviously just have like for example, I have a little tiny evacuation tank for my gecko, but then we also have a carrier for the dog. And then also coach your kids. make sure they know what to do, especially if they're in a situation where they're not with you, they're home alone. Tell them where the emergency supplies are, tell them what to do, have practices. And again, this goes for all disasters. Like, teach them what to do in an earthquake, teach them what to do. I mean, theoretically, they probably aren't going to be home alone in a hurricane, but like stuff like a tornado, floods, things that happen quickly without warning. Have your family understand what to do, and also where to meet. Have ways to contact your family other than phone calls, because oftentimes phone lines will go down, the internet won't be available, and your family members that don't live in those areas are going to be freaking out. And oftentimes 911 calls and phone systems also fail because so many people are calling in to their friends and family to figure out what's happening. So have other ways to contact people, and try as soon as you can to notify the people that you care about, like, hey, I'm okay, this is where I'm at, if you need help, let them know. But have a plan in place for both yourself, your family, but also people around you that know you. Even check in with your neighbors, like make sure they, especially like elderly neighbors, if you know that the storm is coming, if you know that flooding is likely, check in with them and make sure they know. It's important that we like check in with each other, take care of each other, because really community is extremely important during disasters like this. And oftentimes our neighbors are the ones that are like, hey, there's a family in there, like you need to go help them. So like make sure you know the people around you. Oh, and then have like medical stuff, especially if you're reliant on medications or have specific things that you need for your life. Have those on hand, have extra documentation. That way you can have access to these life-saving treatments if you are in those situations. If there are barricades telling you not to go to certain locations, don't do it. There are barricades for a reason. Also, be cautious of other things that can come with floods. Animals sometimes freak out and are coming out. Like you can, in certain areas that of the country, you can have venomous snakes. You can have, if you're like in Florida, you can have crocodiles, stuff like, or alligators. Just be very aware of the different types of risks that exist where you live specifically, and try to factor those into your plans. And then lastly, or two things actually. One of the other risks that people forget to consider is electrocution, especially if you are in a enclosed region. I don't quite know if it's a big body of water and then there's like a power line. That might not be bad as long as you don't touch the wire. But I know that electricity can travel through the water. So you have to be, especially like if you're in your house with electrical stuff, if the power's not out, you can be at risk of being electrocuted. So if you know a flood is coming, or if your house is starting to flood, turn off the electricity in your house because that will prevent you from getting electrocuted. Do not touch down power lines. If you know there's power lines nearby, do not go in those areas. Be very wary of all of the different hazards that can exist around you. That way you can properly prepare in the case of a disaster, because it's much, much better to be safe than sorry. You might never need to use any of that information, but having that peace of mind, knowing how to protect yourself, is going to go a long way for you. And I mean, even if you never have to use that information, you never know, you might pass that information on to somebody else who does end up having to use that information. And then make sure that with the cleanup, you hire professionals. You really should not be doing that yourself. If you are going to do it yourself, make sure you're wearing protective gear, heavy work gloves, protective clothing, boots. You have to get specific face coverings, like the N95 mask that we used during COVID. Like, that's not going to cut it. You're going to have to get like the I don't know what to call them, but the big masks with the filter things on the face. Like, they almost look like the nuclear people masks. Let me see what they're called. And then one other thing you'll really want to have is a weather radio, especially one that has the capacity to call for help. They'll work. Oftentimes they'll have some that are like, what do you call it? Like, they have a thing that you spin and it'll make it work for you. Let's see. It's called a NIOSH approved respirator, NIOSH, with at least P100 filters. This is definitely something you'll want to look up. An N95 respirator, basically a respirator rather than a mask, because that will filter out even mold and lead, asbestos, stuff like that can exist in flooded water, flooded areas. But yeah, get a weather radio as well, because it will give you updates on the storm, even if the power's out. And again, oftentimes the really good ones will have a thing where you can call for help, even if like 911 is not working or is overwhelmed. So so have food and water, have supplies that you might need for your health, and honestly, have those masks in general, because even if you're not cleaning up your house, like just being in the floodwaters, breathing that stuff in, you can get a lot of different diseases, fungus in your lungs, leptosporidium, stuff like that. So have masks already available to you. And then boots as well, like rain boots. Have supplies that match your needs, as well as protecting you and your important documents from water damage. There's a lot to consider with flooding, because it can happen for all sorts of reasons, in all types of locations. It doesn't always come with a warning. Sometimes it can happen very quickly. Stuff like tsunamis and flash floods can happen with no warning at all. You can even have rogue tsunamis that appear without an earthquake because they're happening on the other side of the ocean. But you want to be as knowledgeable as you can about what to do in flooded situations, because again, I've said this a lot, but I cannot reiterate it. People die a lot from being washed away in floodwaters. And unfortunately, with the way that water acts, even if it's shallow, it can still pull you under the water and hold you down, pin you down. It can put things on top of you, and you can drown in very shallow water, especially if it's moving. So do not test the waters. No pun intended. Be as wary as you can, and again, don't be stupid. Please. Again, your life is worth way more than cars or pictures for Instagram or, hey, watch me. So give water the respect that it deserves, because it very much could kill you. So I wanted to, because it was kind of a heavy topic, I wanted to end with a poem. This one is dedicated to everyone that was affected by Hurricane Helene. They had extremely significant flooding. It was considered a once in 1,000-year event. And so I wrote this about the struggles that they went through and the experience that these people had. So I just wanted to end with the poem, even though it is about something sad. I just thought it would be a little bit lighter than like, yeah, don't die. That is actually the thing that they use is turn around, don't drown. So keep that in mind. So this poem is called Helene. In the vanishing brings the emptiness of a hollow cave. Suddenly, everything. Then suddenly, not a thing. Thundering of the gods, folding like origami into the blackboard of sound. Dark and empty, dripping with the tears left by the forest stuck above, with the senses of the living overridden by the sense of the dead. There was a crime here today, one a long time coming, one driven by ignorance and misallocated concern, one they knew would come, when they said they'd be there, yet instead they blamed the broken roads, leaving flailing limbs forgotten, to cling to trees and homes. Sputtering ears listening to the screams of the ones washed away. They then faced the TVs, begging for funds, funneled into the stapled tabs of a mouthpiece's lackluster stay. Watching the problem they themselves took part in, keeping their mouths shut only now, to hide their false shock that the wells have washed away. Feeding carelessly on the wantons of broken families, still reflecting the faces of the lost in their eyes. Stories from the weary worried projected into the dark, like flashlight beams, onto those who actually cared. Blankly holding blankets on shoulders, replaying tattered mental notes, houses and lives ripped away from their moorings, taken away by the disgusting economic cyclonic rush. Feeding airtime to hungry speakers only fertilizes the mudraker's rights. How can we put so much worth in paper when it's only human hands that absolve us from the sickening filth? Only hands can revive life. So where are the hands of those we buy from, work for, voted for, rely on? Where are you now? That was obviously about the politicians. That didn't help. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you learned something and enjoyed my explanation of a bunch of different floods. I very much enjoyed talking about this topic, and yeah.
By examining his own attitude towards the possibilities of peace, towards the Soviet Union, towards the course of the Cold War.
Art muscle. It was a way of making me feel that they were a part of me.
You see it on the bridge. Wait, how they get it? If the government had to change the screw in the bridge, they had to shut it down. They got state troopers out there. They got lanes closed. They got their own strange machines. How did they get up there?